Dig 4 meters down almost anywhere in central London and the city starts telling you its secrets. A scorched black layer of ash, Roman roof tiles, a medieval shoe, a Victorian gin bottle, a bombed-out brick from 1940. London doesn't bury its past so much as stack it, layer upon layer, like sediment in a riverbed. And that's fitting, because London was never supposed to exist at all. It began as a muddy, flood-prone stretch of marshland on a river too wide to bridge anywhere else nearby. No ancient temple marked it as sacred. No tribal capital sat on the site. It was simply useful, a crossing point, a harbor, a place where boats could land and roads could meet. That should have made it forgettable. Instead, for 2,000 years, London has been burned, plagued, bombed, flooded, and abandoned. And every single time, it has rebuilt itself larger than before. Empires rose and fell around it. It absorbed conquerors, refugees, merchants, and rebels, and it kept growing anyway. This is the story of how a patch of Thameside mud became one of the most powerful cities on Earth. The year is 43 AD. A Roman invasion force, 4 legions strong, close to 20,000 men, has just waded ashore in Kent on the orders of Emperor Claudius. Britain is a prize Rome has wanted for nearly a century, and now it's finally taking it. The legions push inland and run straight into a problem: the River Thames. Wide, tidal, and unbridged. The Romans need a crossing point close enough to the sea for supply ships, but narrow enough to bridge. They find it at a spot where 2 low gravel hills rise just above the floodplain. It isn't glamorous, it's swampy and exposed. But it works, and that's all Rome needs. Within a few years, a settlement appears on the north bank. The Romans call it Londinium. It has no grand origin myth, no founding king. It's a logistics hub that turns into a town almost by accident. A wooden bridge goes up roughly where London Bridge stands today, and around it a port begins to grow. Traders from Gaul, soldiers from the Rhineland and Syria. Within a decade, Londinium is a genuinely cosmopolitan outpost on the edge of the known world. Then, in 60 or 61 AD, it nearly ends before it's begun. Boudica, queen of the Iceni, has watched Rome humiliate her family and plunder her people, and she's done waiting. Her army storms south, and Londinium, undefended, with no walls, is burned to the ground. Modern excavations still find a thin red layer of scorched clay under the city of London, the physical scar of that destruction. Rome doesn't abandon the site. It doubles down. A new, larger Londinium rises from the ash, eventually ringed by a defensive wall nearly 2 miles around, parts of which still stand today, tucked between glass office towers. At its height, perhaps 60,000 people live here, making it the largest settlement in Roman Britain. A forum, a basilica, bathhouses, an amphitheater buried, until 1988, beneath what's now the Guildhall. Ships dock here from across the empire, unloading wine from Italy, olive oil from Spain, fine pottery from Gaul. Inscriptions found along the riverbank record traders, soldiers, and officials born as far away as North Africa and the Eastern Mediterranean. A reminder that this corner of a remote northern province was, for a while, genuinely connected to the entire Roman world. But Rome's grip on the island is loosening. By 410 AD, the empire is collapsing under pressure on every frontier, and Britain is simply too costly to hold. The legions withdraw. Without imperial trade, coinage, and administration, Londinium's economy doesn't slow down. It collapses outright. Within a generation or two, a city that once held tens of thousands shrinks to a scatter of people picking through the ruins. For roughly 2 centuries, the old Roman city stands empty, roofs falling in, weeds splitting the mosaic floors. London goes dark. The people who eventually settle the area aren't interested in moving back into a dead Roman ruin. Anglo-Saxon farmers regard the old walled city with something close to dread. One surviving poem describes Roman ruins as the work of giants, built by hands its writer can't even imagine. So instead of resettling within the walls, the Saxons build fresh, about a mile to the west, along the riverbank near where Covent Garden and the Strand sit. By the early 8th century, Londonwijk is a genuine trading success. Amber down from the Baltic, millstones and wine from the Rhineland, pottery from across the Channel. At its peak, it may hold around 8,000 residents, modest next to Roman Londinium, but a real functioning port town all the same. Then the raids begin. Viking longships start probing the English coast in the late 700s, and by the 9th century, they're sailing straight up the Thames. Londonwijk is sacked in 842. It's sacked again in 851. The unwalled trading town is simply too exposed to defend. It's King Alfred the Great who finally solves the problem, not by building new walls, but by reusing old ones. In 886, after retaking the area from Danish control, Alfred resettles the population back inside the abandoned Roman walls, which are far easier to defend than an open riverside village. He repairs the old Roman defenses, and the city takes a new name: Lundenburg, London Fortress. The old trading settlement is left to fade, eventually earning the name Aldwych, the Old Settlement, a name that survives today as a street in central London. For the next century and a half, control of the city seesaws between Saxon and Danish kings. In 1016, the Danish king Cnut, yes, the same Cnut of the legend about commanding the tide, makes London his capital. And in 1042, King Edward the Confessor builds a great new abbey just west of the city walls, Westminster Abbey. It's a decision that quietly sets London's geography for the next 1,000 years. A city of trade within the walls, a seat of royal power a mile upstream. Edward dies without an heir in January 1066, and England's succession crisis explodes into outright war. Harold Godwinson takes the crown, but across the Channel, William, Duke of Normandy, insists the throne was promised to him. Harold beats back a Norwegian invasion in the north, then has to force march his exhausted army south to meet William's force at Hastings. On October 14, 1066, Harold is killed, and William wins the kingdom. On Christmas Day that same year, he's crowned King of England inside Westminster Abbey. The Anglo-Saxon age is over. William doesn't trust the city he's just conquered. London backed Harold, and its citizens are wealthy enough to cause trouble. So William builds fortresses to keep them in check. Most famously the Tower of London, whose central keep, the White Tower, rises nearly 90 feet with walls up to 15 feet thick in places. It's less a home than a warning, planted right at the city's edge. But medieval London grows in spite of, or maybe because of, Norman control. By 1100, somewhere around 15,000 to 18,000 people live within and around the old walls. Trade guilds emerge to organize and protect different crafts: goldsmiths, fishmongers, weavers, merchants, and they accumulate real political weight. When rebellious barons corner King John in 1215 and force him to seal the Magna Carta, London's support is decisive, and the city extracts its own prize: the right to elect its own mayor and to govern much of its own affairs, free from royal interference. Markets multiply through these centuries: Smithfield for livestock, Billingsgate for fish hauled fresh off the river. And the streets carry names that still survive today, often describing exactly what was once sold there. Bread Street, Milk Street, Cheapside, from the Old English word for market. London Bridge, rebuilt in stone between 1176 and 1209, becomes something closer to a small city of its own. Houses and shops crowd both sides of the roadway. There's a chapel partway across, a drawbridge for ships, and, in grimmer moments, the severed heads of traitors mounted on spikes as a public warning. For over 600 years, it remains the only bridge across the Thames anywhere in London. Then, in 1348, disaster arrives by ship. Black rats carrying infected fleas come ashore at the docks, bringing with them Yersinia pestis, the Black Death. Within 2 years, somewhere between a third and half of London's population is dead. A city that had grown to roughly 70,000 to 80,000 people empties out almost overnight. Mass graves are dug in fields outside the walls because the parish churchyard simply can't keep up. And entire streets stand silent, their houses left to rot.